Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nazir, daf nun zayin. Yeah. Today's daf is sponsored by Nancy Kaladny in honor of Lisa Kaladny on her birthday, with appreciation and love to my amazing daughter-in-law. May your learning and chesed continue to grow in the new year. Today's daf is sponsored by Ricky and Alan Zibit in loving memory of Helen Zibit, Hannah Bat Yaakov Rachel Leah on her 23rd year at site. Mom, we miss your warmth and love every day. And in honor of the birthdays of our dear daughter-in-law, Devorah Cohen Zibit, and son-in-law, Jay Blumenreich, who have enriched our family in countless beautiful ways. We love you both so much. We're now going to get started. Reminder to register for the Siyum. There's details up on our site about the Siyums, both in Israel on the Hebrew side, on the Zoom Siyum in English. The Hebrew Siyum is also in Zoom. Hebrew Siyum taking place, at least the one in Ranana that I'll be speaking at with the Zoom with Rabbanit Shimoni will be on Wednesday. Some of the others will be during the week and different days. And we also have Rabbanit Chamutal Shoval from Daf Mishalahen. If you follow that in Hebrew on our the last number of years, she'll be speaking in Manhattan to Siyum for Hadran. So if you're around Manhattan and you'd like to go, details of that have been posted around. If you don't have details, you can email us at info@hadran.org.il. Okay, getting started with our daf. We have a bit of an interesting daf today. We're leaving the basic laws of Tum and Tara, even though we are still going to be in laws of Tum and Tara, but not as much the nitty-gritty grotesque details of the bones and all that. We're going to finish off that right now. We ended with it, and then we'll start the 7th chapter, which is all about different sfeikot. We already got a little bit of an into what's going to be in the next chapter in yesterday's daf, when we saw that whole case of someone who's a Nazir, who maybe was impure, who maybe had leprosy. We'll get to that case. Today we're going to start with a different case of doubt, and end with an interesting story of Rav Huna's wife. So starting with the Mishna from yesterday. In the Mishna yesterday, Rabbi Akiva had a whole question about the revi'it dam. He basically disagreed with the law that a quarter log of blood does, if someone comes in physical contact with, touches, or moves, rather than in intent, he thinks that a nazir should shave for that. Okay, that would cause the nazir to be at the level of impurity that would need shaving, sacrifices, etc. Whereas our Mishnah said no. So Rabbi Akiva said, it's simple kavachomer logic. What's the kavachomer logic? Well, etzem keseora is a less stringent halacha. The bone the size of a barley is less strict, less stringent than revi'it dam. How do we know that? Because in regular laws of impurity, if you have a bone the size of a barley in a house or a tent, it won't make everything impure. But if you have a quarter log of blood in a tent from a dead body, it will make everything impure in that tent. So since revi'it dam is more strict, and the bone does pass on impurity and cause the nazir to shave for it if the nazir comes in physical contact with it, then wouldn't you think the same would be true for this quarter log of blood? However, basically the answer that he gets, when Rabbi Akiva says this, and they said, I brought it in front of Rabbi Yehoshua, Rabbi Akiva says, Rabbi Yehoshua said to me, Yafeh amalta, ela ken amru halacha. You said very nicely, but it's halacha l'moshe misin. Right? It's a tradition, and we don't go against these traditions. Now, what exactly is the tradition? So yesterday I explained that the tradition is that the revi'it dam is halacha l'moshe misinai, that it doesn't make the nazir shave. But the Gemara, in the end, doesn't actually agree with what I said, and suggests first, maybe it's that, maybe it's something else, and is going to answer that it's actually something else. So that's what we're going to see right now in this little section of the Gemara before we finish the chapter. Ibayilihu, top of our daf. They asked a question. When he said it's halacha and therefore you can't learn it from a kavachomer, is it etzem keseora halacha? Is the fact that a bone the size of a barley is going to make the nazir shave, maybe that's the halacha, that's the tradition. And if that's the tradition, revi'it dam kavachomer, we're trying to learn from there to a kavachomer in the revi'it dam, because again, etzem is lenient, and revi'it dam is more strict, so whatever's true for the lenient should be true for the more strict. Well, ein danim kavachomer mehalacha. And then we would say that what Rabbi Yehoshua is telling him is, if something is learned out by a halacha l'moshe misinai, which basically often it means, we don't really know why this is, but it means you can't apply logic to that. You can't apply logical argumentation to something that is a halacha l'moshe misinai. So if this is halacha l'moshe Messina, you can't derive from there any sort of kavachomer because there's no logic to it, basically. It doesn't work on the logical plane. So you can't say, oh, that's lenient and yet has a strict halacha, so the one that's strict should have also a strict halacha, because that's lenient, has a strict halacha, but that whole thing is only because it's halacha l'moshe Messina. And therefore, you can't learn anything from. Odilma, that's one option. Odilma, or is it the way I said yesterday, which is Revi dam is halacha. The fact that you don't shave for a nazir on a quarter log of blood, even if you touch it, is a tradition, halacha l'moshe Messina. And etzem ksora kal v'chomer, which means theoretically, you might want to do this kal v'chomer from etzem ksora to Revi dam, but you can't because ein danim kal v'chomer mehalacha. But you can't do a kal v'chomer to derive something that goes against a tradition. That's the way we understood it yesterday, option 2. But interestingly, the Gemara is going to choose option 1. And the Gemara is going to say, not like we explained it yesterday, but Tashma, let's learn from here. There's a braita that reads like this. Etzem keseora halacha, the fact that etzem, the size of a barley, a bone the size of a barley, will make the nazir shave if coming in contact with it, that is halacha l'moshe Messina. And Revi dam is a kavachomer. Revi dam, you might want to learn kavachomer from there, but you can't because ein danim kavachomer mehalacha. So there you have it, different from the way we understood it yesterday. Now we're going to understand it the opposite way, which is it's the Revi dam that's the halacha. It still means the same thing. It still means you can't learn from one to the other. It's just a different reason is why you can't learn, right? The thing we said yesterday is if the halacha conflicts with the tradition that's learned out, in other words, we have this, if the logic conflicts with the tradition, the conclusion of the logic conflicts with the tradition, it's a problem. Now we're saying it's not the conclusion. It's that you can't even make a logical argument starting with halacha l'moshe Messina because it's not logical. It's just this halacha that we have passed down that we might not really understand it, in which case we can't start deriving anything from it because it's unique, kind of standalone. And with that, Hadran alach kohen gadol, and we'll start our new chapter all about sfeikot, doubts, cases of doubt. So shnei nazirim, okay, there's 2 nazirim, sha'amar lahem echad. A person comes along and says to these 2 nazirim, I saw that one of you became impure. But I'm not sure which one. So somehow they didn't realize they became impure. But he said, I saw the 2 of you, whether he's not sure if one went into a tent, that there was a dead body and he's not sure which one. He saw them only from the back and he's not sure. And they didn't know who it was, or I don't know what the case could be. But somehow maybe he saw a dead, one stepped on a dead bone and they didn't notice. But he's not sure which one it was. Either he knew at some point, now forgot, or he just never really saw well enough to know who it was. So now what do? We have one who's a safek, one is a nazir. They're both nazirim, definitely. But one was impure. Now, if he was impure, he would need to go through shaving another time, sacrifices, right? Different set of sacrifices for the nazir who becomes impure. And then obviously doing another 30 days, but we don't know who it is. So what do? Classic case of sfeikot. So So they both shave and they bring a korban tuma. Obviously, when do they do this? After 30 days. Because if you weren't the one who was impure, then you're obviously forbidden to shave for 30 days. So even though if you were definitely a nazir who became impure, you'll bring your sacrifice as soon as you finished your 7 days of purity. In this case, they have to wait. So basically, how did they bring a korban? So we're going to see. Okay, so you're going to see exactly how they do it. So they bring between the 2 of them, this is how it works. Between the 2 of them, they bring, okay, let's even talk about it outside this before we read it. Theoretically, between the 2 of them, what do we need to bring? We need to bring 1 set of nazir sacrifices of impurity and 2 sets of purity. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to bring the exact amount of sacrifices and make stipulations. We've seen these kind of stipulations in sacrifices before. So this is how you do it. They bring a korban tuma v'korban tahara. So between the 2 of them, they bring 2 sets of, right, 1 set of korban tuma, 1 set of korban tahara. Ve'omer, im anihu tameh, he says the following: if I'm the one who's impure, korban tuma sheli. So then this set between the 2 of us that we're bringing of impurity, the one that's for impurity is mine. V'korban tahara shalcha. And yours is the purity one, is the one of completion of nizirut. And if it's the reverse, and I'm the one who's pure, korban tahara sheli, korban tuma shalcha, then the set of impurity is mine, of purity, finishing this is mine. And the tumah is yours. V'soflim, Becky, you're asking all the questions that we're going to get to today, so have no fears. V'soflim 30 yom. And then you count 30 days. Why do you count 30 days? Well, because one of them needs to be a Nazir for another 30 days because he only brought his impurity sacrifices. So we still need another 30 days. So both of them, out of a case of doubt, since we don't know which is which, both of them have to keep another 30 days of nazirut, so they can't drink wine, they can't become pure to dead, they can't cut their hair, etc. And then what do? At the end of the 30 days, mevi'im korban ta'ara, they bring one set of purity, right? Because remember, what did we say? You need two sets of completion of nazirut, because they're both nazirim, and one set of impurity. So they brought already two of the three, one of purity, one of impurity, and now they need to bring the third one. Ve'omel, and again, they make the following stipulation. Now notice, by the way, it doesn't say at this point that they shave. You notice that? It says they shave in the beginning. It doesn't say anything about shaving here. We're going to get back to that later in the Gemara, although there's a little bit of confusion about things later on. Ve'omel. And then they say, Imaniu atameh, if I'm the one who was impure, then, and they go through now a whole description of the history. Then korban tumah sheli, then the last time we brought sacrifices, the impurity one was mine, the korban ta'ara shelcha, and the completion one was yours. So you don't really need anything yet. And ze korban ta'arati, the one that we're bringing now together is mine. Ve'im ani latavol, but if but if I'm the one who was pure from the beginning and wasn't the one who was impure, korban ta'ara sheli, then last time I already gave my completed, right, my sacrifices of completion. V'korban tumah shelcha, and the one last time was yours for the impurity. V'zeh korban ta'aratcha, and now you're the one who's obligated in the sacrifice, so it's yours. Okay, so we have a very good solution is to how to bring. We don't need to bring any extra sets because you can't bring sets out of doubt, right? It's sacrifice. You can't bring sacrifice. We already learned for no reason. The other issue, as Becky pointed out, is going to be the shaving. Why is the shaving a problem? Because you're not allowed to shave your peot. Right? And the Nazir has to shave all of his hair, including the peot. Now, that's only allowed if you're actually a definitive Nazir. So the Mishna actually seems to have it pretty good because the Mishna says they both shave the first time, but they don't shave the second time. However, the Gemara is not going to understand it that way. The Gemara, maybe it's unclear what the Gemara understands, but perhaps the Gemara is going to understand that even though it doesn't say you shave at the second stage, you do shave at the second stage. And then we're going to have a bit of a question. How on earth are you allowed to shave? So even though the simple reading of the Mishnah seems to say they only shave the first stage, they're going to seem, at least according to some commentaries, that the Gemara is going to seem to believe that you even shave at a later stage. So now the Gemara asks, before we get even to that, the first question of the Gemara is very simple. There's a concept. It's simple if you understand this concept. There's a concept. I'm going to read this all inside in a minute, but I'll explain it outside first. We're going to learn it from Sotah. It comes up many times in the Gemara. Now it's nice because we're leading into Sotah. What's a case of a Sotah? A case of a Sotah is a case where a man is jealous of his wife, that she's been talking to some man, and he warns her, don't go into a room alone with him. And then she goes into a room alone with him. And then basically she's called a Sotah at that point, and she has to drink the Sotah waters, right? There's a whole process that happens. We'll get into all the details because she did this issue wrong. And basically she's considered, the Torah calls her nitme'ah. She's impure. Now she's not impure, impurity like coming in contact with the dead. But it's the same way they call non-kosher food tameh. They call a woman who was basically convicted of being a Sotah. She's nitma'ah. Now, we're strict with her. In other words, it's still a case of doubt. We don't really know what happened in that room. But she was in a room alone with a man, and we're concerned enough to make her do this whole process. We're concerned enough that we're going to be, it's basically a case of suffix, a doubt. We don't know whether it's true or not. And we're going to be strict. Where does that case transpire? In public or in private? Obviously in private. It was her alone in a room with a man. So they learned from this. This basically builds a paradigm for cases of impurity that are doubtful situations like ours, for example. We have a case where someone is tameh, impure, out of a doubt. The general principle is if we have a doubt about a case of impurity, if it was in a private space, which today we'll define a little bit what is private, what is public. Like you might think, let's go back to, they call it Rashuda Yachid and Rashuda Rabin. Like that sounds reminiscent of Eruvin and Shabbat, but we're going to define it a little differently here. If it was in a private space and we have a doubt about a case of impurity, we're going to be strict, just like the Sotah. But if there's a case of a doubt of impurity in a public space, we're going to be lenient and say it's definitely tahor. We don't need to worry about it. So that's going to be the Gemara's question. Because why? Hatane, it says here in our Mishna, Shnei nazirim shamar lahem echad, ra'iti echad bikem shenitma, ve'eni yodeh eze mikem. We have two nazirim. One person saw and said, one of you is impure, and I don't know which one. Am I? Why is this? Where do we learn this whole issue of safek tumah in a private domain? Sotah, from the Sotah. Now, let's define what is private space for the Sotah. Sotah bo'el v'niv elet, who was in that room, the one who supposedly had relations with her, and the woman who he had relations with. That's a niv elet. What is a safek that's like that in a reshutei yachid? It's not just about what type of domain was it. It's how many people were there. So how many people were there? Two. So any case where there's two people and no more, right? We know this from, let's say, laws of Lashon Hara also, or what we call rechilu, telling something that if somebody tells you something, they said it in front of two people, we consider that private. Once they tell three people, we just know word's going to get around. They knew that word was going to get around, and basically it's public information. So things that are with two people are still private. Things with three people are public. And we learn it particularly from the Sotah that there were two people there. But our case had three people. We had the two nazirim who were in doubt, and we had the person who saw them. So there were three people in that space. Now, what's defined as space is a good question. Some people say it has to be they were within 4 cubits of each other, or they were in enclosed space. We don't know exactly. But it seems that these three people were together, and therefore would be public. Now, public, safek tumah in public, we just said, you're pure. So you shouldn't have to worry at all about the whole Mishna is irrelevant. So what do they answer? Right. So again, there were three. I'm not sure if I read all these words. So havale safek tumah b'reshut harabim, it's safek tumah in a public domain. B'chol safek tumah b'reshut harabim sfekot tahor, and every safek tumah in a public space is pure. To which Rav Huna explains that the Mishna is in a unique case. This is what we always call an ukimta. The Mishna is not in any case where there's three people there. It would have to be in the following situation. Be'omer, where he says, Ra'iti tum'ah shenizraka benechem. The third person wasn't close to them. How far, we don't know. But he was at a distance, and he said, I saw some tumah that fell upon you. In other words, I saw it from a distance, maybe that, and that's what Rav Ashi is going to say. I'm a Rav Ashi, Daikanami, you can even infer that from the wording of the Mishnah, as we move now to Amubet. Dekatane eini yodea eze mikem, shma mina. Here's the proof. Proof is in the pudding. Why? He says, I don't know which one of you. Why doesn't he know which one of him? Because he wasn't close enough to them. He must have been at a distance. And that's why this case ends up being. So our first issue is a very side issue, which is, it's not side, it's pretty essential, but it's basically saying, why do we even treat this doubt seriously in this case? Isn't it a safek tumah in reshut harabim? In which case we don't, in a public domain, in which case we don't have it shouldn't be an issue at all. So they basically define it as a reshutei yachid. It must be a private, and again, it's what we call an ukimta. That means that if the three people were really together in a space, it wouldn't be a problem at all. It have to be that one was far away and the two of them were together. It's obviously still a little different than the Sotah, because the Sotah, nobody saw them, right? They only saw them go into the room. They didn't really see what happened there. Here he does at least see, but it's still considered private. Next issue, migalchin u'miviyim. Now we're going to get to this issue of the tiglachat and how it relates. So remember, let's just review. There's an isur, lo takifu pe'at roshchem. Don't take off the pe'ot, but it's said with this word lo takifu. Takifu is to go around, which also, we talked about this before, perhaps there's an opinion that perhaps the only issue is if you just cut your pe'ot, the sidelocks, but you leave the hair, meaning you end up with this round. That's the word takifu, to make a round. You end up with like a circle kind of haircut. And maybe that's the issue. Maybe taking off all your hair is not an issue. But we did learn that many people say it is an issue. And it's just that the obligation of Nazir overrides the prohibition against cutting off your pe'ot. So now the Gemara is going to question, and this is why I said it's a little difficult, because the first stage of shaving should be totally fine. Because either, right, you're a Nazir tahor or you're a Nazir tameh. So you definitely are allowed to shave, because you definitely need to shave. The question is only the later stage, really. And like I said, it didn't say you shave in the later stage, but we'll go with the commentary that seems to say, we're assuming we're talking about the later stage. And then our question is the following. Maybe you weren't the one who was impure, in which case the second shaving you're going to do is going to be forbidden, because maybe you're a regular Nazir, you shaved the first time, and now you can't shave off your payot anymore. There's no obligation of Nazir upon you to shave. So how do we allow this? So Amar Shmuel, Bi'isha v'katan. Again, another what we call ukimta, where the Mishna is only talking to certain people. The Mishna is not talking to men who are grown men. It's only the part, now, the rest of it, yes. But the word migalchin, which is very interesting, because you would think that the majority of cases of Nazirim and in general, the Mishnayot are often thinking of the man in the center. Here they're saying, oh, the Mishnah was actually just talking to women and children, okay? Women and minors, because minors don't have an obligation, right? They're not going to be liable if they do it. So therefore, since there's a suffix here, we'll shave his head. And the women aren't obligated in lo takifu, right? That we'll see in a few minutes, how we know that there's no liability for a woman to shave off her payot. So now they say the following. Shmuel says this is a woman and a minor, but a man would not shave at all in this case, right? He would shave the first time, he wouldn't shave the second time. So now they say, "V'lukman begadol." Why don't you just say that? Why didn't Shmuel say it's a gadol? And what? As I mentioned before, why don't we just say hakafat kol harosh lo shma hakafa? Maybe this encircling your head by removing your payot is only a problem if you're leaving hair in a circle formation. But maybe if you take off all your hair, you remove everything, including the payot, maybe it's not forbidden. So they say the following. We're going to infer from the fact that Shmuel had to say, which we assume he only said as a last resort, it's talking about a woman and a minor, or women and minors, midelo mokim lahaki, from the fact that he didn't say gadol and hakafat kol harosh is not hakafa. Shema mina, we can infer from here, kasabat Shmuel, hakafat kol harosh ma hakafa. We can assume that he thinks removing all the hair on your head, you would be going against this Torah prohibition. And it's not just this issue of having this ring around your head without the payot. So basically, we get rid of that. So we're left with that Shmuel says it's only women and minors, okay, that do the shaving here. The rest of it is relevant to men, but not that line about the shaving. Marzutra says that thing that you said, Shmuel said it's about women and minors. It wasn't said about this Mishnah, even though it would still be the same for this Mishnah, but it was actually said aseifa on a later Mishnah. And what Mishnah is this? This is the Mishnah we made reference to yesterday, where it's the same idea. We had a person who was a Nazir, who was a safek. Maybe they were impure to a dead body. Maybe they were a leper. And if you remember there, every 30 days, right, they finish another section and they do a shaving. They do 4 shavings. Now, that would be the exact same question there. So Nazir shu tameh b'safek u'buchlat b'safek. We have a Nazir who's maybe became impure and maybe became a leper. Right? He can eat. He basically does the 2 shavings of the mitzorah after 30 days and then after 60 days, and then can eat sacrificial meat. And they don't tell you the rest, and then does another 2 sets for the impurity and then for the Nazir's completion. And he shaves 4 times. Same question. How could you shave 4 times if it's only a doubt? Maybe you were impure, maybe you were mitzorah. Theoretically, you should only shave 1. The hakafa, right? Isn't he doing isn't he going against the prohibition of hakafa? Amar Shmuel, b'isha v'katan. So Shmuel says, it's a women and minors there. Okay? Only they would do the 4 shavings. Okay, so now we learn, right? Something we said took us obvious yesterday. Now we learned, you don't really do the shavings. You just do the rest of the process, the sacrifices, etc. Or whatever part of the process we're going to see. We'll get to that whole thing, what exactly you do. But the shaving is really only done by, the truth is you can't do the sacrifices either there. Anyway, we'll get to it there and we'll see. But he says the fact that you shave 4 times is going to basically be for just women and minors. Last section for today, and this is the most interesting part, I think, of today's daf in terms of personalities. And like I said, we're going to see Rav Huna's wife. Shuli Mishka wrote an article on Flashback, both teaching about the history, some historical points about Rav Huna and Rav Ada bar Ahava, comparing this story to another place where Rav Huna's wife appears. I would say she asks more questions than she answers, which often happens because there really aren't a lot of answers. But the comparison in and of itself is very interesting. So it's a definite worthwhile read for this week. Let's read the story. Amar Rav Huna. So first, it's just a machloket. So we talked about minors and shaving of minors and shaving off their peot. And it seemed to be, right, if there's a doubt, then a minor would shave. Now we're just talking in general about minors and peot. So according to Rav Huna, not only, right, shouldn't you shave, well, let's put it this way. If you shave off the peot of a minor, you're liable, okay? Even though the minor wouldn't be liable because he's a minor. But if you shave off the peot, we're going to see later, he really only means men, okay? But if a man, let's say, who's commanded, don't take off peot, also can't take off the peot of other people. So Amarle Rav Ada bar Ahava Rav Huna. Now Rav Ada bar Ahava says to Rav Huna, okay, one of the things Shuli talks about is that you see with Rav Ada bar Ahava, even though his name is son of love, he was very a strong zealot, and his opinions come across very strongly. And here he basically, number one, even though we don't see this inside yet, but it's important to understand, he disagrees with Rav Huna and thinks that actually you can take off, if a minor doesn't have an issue himself to remove his peot, because he won't be liable because he's a minor, minors are never liable, then it's actually not forbidden for you or anybody to remove the peot of this child. But Rav Huna said it's forbidden. Okay? So he says to Rav Huna, Amalei Rav Ada bar Ahava Rav Huna, V'didach man megalech lahem. I see your children. They don't have peot. Who shaved off your children's peot? If anyone who shaves off the peot of a child is liable, then who on earth shaved off the peot of your children? To which Amar le Chova. Who's Chova? Chova's his wife. He says, my wife did it. My wife shaved off the peot. Now, the reason Rav Huna is saying this is because Rav Huna believes that only someone who's commanded lo takifu is forbidden to take off the peot of the children. But women are not commanded lo takifu. We're going to see this inside in a minute. I just want you to understand it at this point. Women are not commanded, so they're not liable if they shave off. Now, whether that means they should and can is a whole different question. And whether he's saying my wife did it because it's allowed, that's one thing, or my wife did it because she wouldn't be obligated, but maybe it's not the best thing anyway, right? Maybe we all know that people are very careful not to have their kids' peot cut off, even though they're minors. So anyway, whether he says my wife did it and I told my wife she should do it, or my wife did it and, like she's going to do what she's going to do, I didn't get involved, which is another approach. Right. So it's a question with rabbis when their wives don't follow halacha exactly the way they do. Is it that the husband said she could, or is it that the wife has her own mind of her own? She could do what she wants, right? Anyway, so Rav Ada bar Ahava is a little bit upset about this whole thing because he says, I don't get you. This is a little, you're not allowed to do it, but it's okay if your wife does it. What's that all about? So he says the following, and this shows his zealous attitude. Tikbirun chova lebaneha. Chova should bury her children. Okay? I'm reading it, and this is always the problem with translation. Either he's giving a curse, like this is crazy. Now, you have to remember what's fascinating about this whole thing is Rav Ada bar Ahava thinks it's okay for chova. He thinks it's okay for Rav Huna to shave the peot. But what he's saying is, according to you, you won't do the dirty work, but you're letting your wife do it. Like that doesn't seem right. And he's basically saying, l'shitata, according to you, this is a problem. Or he's saying, and then he's basically cursing her. Or maybe he didn't mean it as a curse, but maybe he's saying, according to your logic, she's really causing her son's death. Why is she causing her son's death? Because she's removing their peot. And if you think kids' peot shouldn't be removed by men, well, it really means the kids' peot should be there. And she's removing them and causing the sons to sin by not having peot. So it's unclear exactly which way he's going here. Does he mean it as a curse, or was he just saying this is the result of her actions? Notice her name is Chova. Julie suggests one interpretation that you'll read it there, but right, it's very interesting. Her name is Chova. Chova is liable, right? So it's interesting. Maybe it's showing she's liable for doing something. I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about her name. It's a very odd name. Most people aren't named Chova. Anyway, the story goes on, and this is the interesting and I would say hard part of the story. We know this very much from other Talmudic stories. You have to watch what you say, because often when you say things, whether he meant it as a curse or he didn't mean it as a curse, it became a curse. Interesting, they say Rav Huna. It really should be to Rav Huna and Chova, right? Actually, I want to look at that bet. Maybe the bet adds Chova. Where does it go? So many different notes here. Bet, but Kama Rishonim, yeah, it says Michova. Okay, it adds the word from Chova. So in any case, what happened? All the years is an interesting way the curse came true. While Rav Ada Rav Huna was alive, none of the children of Chova and Rav Huna survived, which seems to imply once he died, the curse was no longer in effect, and they were able to have children. But very tragic. Considering that Rav Ada Rav Huna didn't even agree with this whole halacha, it's very interesting, right? But he just thought that maybe Rav Huna was a little two-faced here. So now we're going to understand the machloket a little bit better. Michte travayu svira. Okay, it seems they both hold hakafat kol harosh ma'akafa. Okay, taking off all the hair would be hakafa. But mamai kamiflage. What is the root of this debate? Rav Huna saval lo takifu pe'at roshchem v'lo tashchit et pe'at zkancha. So in the same pasuk, it says, don't take off the peot, right? And don't destroy the pe'ah of your zakan, right? This is why we don't, right? The halacha says you can't shave with a razor, right? You can shave with a shaver, other methods, or some people don't shave at all based on this. It all depends how you understand lo tashchit pe'at zkancha. But these are two commandments given in the same pasuk. What do we learn? What does Rav Huna learn from here? Anyone who has a beard to shave off is commanded not to remove their peot. But hane nashe, women, since they don't have beards, even though they might have peot, the whole commandment of hakafa doesn't apply to them. And since it doesn't apply to them, they don't spell this out. But since it doesn't apply at all, not just to removing their own peot, but to removing other people's peot. So what this is basically saying is if, let's say, a man goes into a haircutter's and there's a Jewish woman or a Jewish man, okay, if the haircut is Jewish and they're male or female, it will make a difference, according to Rav Huna. If the male cuts it off, the male is actually liable for removing someone else's peot, but the woman will not be liable for removing the Jewish man's peot because she's not commanded. So right, it's a bit strange, and I think that's what Rav Ada Rav Huna was bothered by. In the end, you're removing peot from someone who can't, right? Who can't get their peot removed. So you're really doing something wrong, even though for you it's not wrong. Seems a little bit strange. So Rav Ada Rav Huna saval achad makif v'achad nikaf b'mashma. It's right. It includes both the person who takes it off and the person, though, like you're ignoring the person who it gets taken off of. V'itakesh makif l'nikaf. It basically connects these two. If the one who can't get the peot removed is liable, then the one who removes them is liable as well. Doesn't matter man or woman. So therefore, a katan, a minor, who won't be liable for this, won't get punished. He's not in the realm of getting punished because he's young. Makif nami la machayef Sotah. Man removes them, a woman removes them, it doesn't matter. So basically, we have this machloket. Let's just review the machloket. We're going to stop here because then the Gemara is going to suggest maybe this whole thing about hakafat kol rosh is a machloket tanaim, and we're going to start it right to there. I'm going to leave that for tomorrow because we really barely started in today's daf. So this is the end for today. What we basically have is this machloket. Besides the whole interaction that happened with them, where basically Rav Ada ends up cursing Rav Huna and his future children, really curses his wife and her future children. But we end up with this approach. Basically, Rav Huna says, if you're liable, then you're liable for doing it to others. It has no effect on whether they're liable or not. So if you remove the peot of a minor, you're liable, okay? But only if you yourself are commanded. So if you're commanded, you can't do it to someone else. Obviously, it doesn't say you can't do it to a woman who's not commanded, but a minor, because I guess a minor will grow up to be commanded, so you can't do it to a male minor. Whereas Rav Ada says it has nothing to do with your command. It has to do with the command of the one whose peot are being removed. And if you're removing the peot of someone who's liable, then you're liable for removing his peot. Male or female, it doesn't matter. So again, that would mean if you're a male grown person who goes to a hair cutter's and a female or a male removes your hair, your sideburns, then basically they are liable. But if it's a minor, no one's liable, male or female, it doesn't make a difference. So the whole distinction, and that's why Rav Ada got so upset with Rav Huna, because he doesn't distinguish male or female. Now, he doesn't think you'd be obligated anyway, but he says to Rav Huna, why on earth would you distinguish male or female? It all depends on the person whose hair you're shaving. Okay, so that's the interaction between them. Let's do a quick review of today's daf. We started off with which is the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Is it the etzem kaseorah that a nazir has to shave, or is it the revi dam, the quarter log of blood that the nazir doesn't shave for? And why does that override the kaf chomer? Right? Is it that you can't derive a kaf chomer from a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, or you can derive whatever you want, but in the end, if it goes against a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, it's not going to work. Then we have the case of the two nazirim. We have the whole process that they do. They basically do they bring two sets of sacrifices at the first 30 days and stipulate this one for you and this one, right? Whichever one is supposed to go where. And then the second time, after another 30 days of being nazirim, they bring one set between the two of them because altogether they're only liable 3 sets. And that's how they bring the 3 sets together in a way that kind of covers all their bases. And they shave, which later we said must be only for women and children, because otherwise you'd have a problem with the shaving. Again, the first shaving seems to be okay. It would be at the second stage that would be a problem, even though the Mishnah didn't say that, the second stage, but we assume the Mishnah meant that there was a second stage. And then before we got to that of Shmuel of saying it was a minor and women, we had this question of, isn't this safek tuma in a public space, and safek tuma in a public space shouldn't be an issue at all, to which we said, oh, it must have been private, and the one person standing there must have been somewhere else and looking in. And therefore, it's still considered private, and that's why we're strict here. And then, like I said, we got into this issue of Shmuel, that it must be a minor or women. And from there, we got into that he must hold that shaving off all your hair includes the prohibition of shaving off your sidelocks, because otherwise he could have had a much better answer, which is there's no problem of a nazir of lo takifu because it doesn't apply. The nazir's taking off all their hair. And then we talked about the taking off the liability for taking off the hair of a minor. Is that a problem or not? Does it depend if you're a man or a woman and you're commanded in this or not? And I see you're asking, Adina, I'm not 100% sure, but it seems to me that if you go get a haircut and they take off your payout, and they're also liable in the case, right, depending on who you hold by, but it seems like I think you would both be liable. And that's partially why they say the Chova will bury her children, because they're going to end up without sideburns. So there seems to be possibly a double liability here, which is an interesting question. And yes, Julie, it does seem like barbers in Israel should attend the Shiur, or Jewish barbers in general, to understand these halachot. Okay, again, this is not a halacha l'maaseh class, so obviously there's different opinions here. With that, we'll finish for today. Have a great day, everybody.